Today on Sports Central, we'll be going over our next full prediction of this 2020 offseason, and it will be over the Mississippi State Bulldogs, and this is a team that went 6-7 in 2019. They were able to make it to a bowl game, and all around, it's a pretty good season for this team, but how will they be in 2020 is what we're going over here today. We're going to be going over a few players that this team will be losing and returning, along with a full prediction on their schedule and a full preview in the process. So yeah, with that, let's look at your season trends from 2019 for Mississippi State. And they were 6-7 once again last season. They were 3-5 between September and October, and 3-2 between November and the postseason. So really, there was no major improvement out of this team. Of course, going into November, it kind of looked like a long shot for this team to make it all the way, of course, to the postseason, which they were 3-5 at the time. So they'd have to win 3 games in November to do so, and they were able to do it. So that was certainly good for this Mississippi State team. And looking at some of their key wins from last season, they had a big win against Kentucky, 28-13. They also had a blowout win against Abilene Christian, 45-7, and then they finished off the regular season with a win against their rival in Ole Miss, 21-20. And it looked like Ole Miss was about to get a win there, so that was a big win at last second for Mississippi State. Looking at your returning production heading into 2020, they do lose their top quarterback, Tommy Stevens. They had a couple of big quarterbacks last season, of course, Tommy Stevens and Garrett Schrader. They both split time, and yeah, Tommy Stevens overall had a bigger season. He had over 1,100 yards with 11 touchdowns and 5 interceptions. And he also had nearly 400 rushing yards to go along with that. And then Garrett Schrader had just right around 1,200 yards with 8 touchdowns and 5 interceptions, along with 600 rushing yards in there too. So yeah, both of those quarterbacks really, they put up a decent seasons, but of course they did have a bit of a accuracy issue in the end. But they also bring in their quarterback, KJ Costello, out of Stanford, and he is a great quarterback. I mean, if you look back in the Pac-12, especially in his 2018 season, he was a great quarterback, definitely one of the best in the Pac-12. And if he's able to stay healthy, I think KJ Costello could lead this Mississippi State team to a big season. I mean, if you look at his upside, I mean, he's definitely a player to watch out for. I mean, he put some pretty great stats a couple of seasons ago. So yeah, KJ Costello, I mean, you also got to consider back at Stanford, he really had nothing to work with. I mean, Stanford, I mean, they've been a pretty good team for some of the past years, but of course, he didn't really have much of an offensive line at all in the seasons that he's been at Stanford. So for him to be able to have more talent around him at an SEC school, I think he definitely could put up a pretty big season compared to how he's done at Stanford. And if you've watched my SEC quarterback rankings video, I mean, I actually have KJ Costello up there really high in the SEC. So yeah, as far as the running back position goes, they do lose their top running backs in Kylan Hill and Nick Gibson. Of course, Kylan Hill put up over 1,500 yards with 11 touchdowns last season. And they also lose their second running back in Nick Gibson, which he had just right around 500 yards with 6 touchdowns. So yeah, the running back situation does look a little bit uncertain right now. I'd be definitely concerned about that. But as far as the receiving position goes, it does look a little bit concerning as well. Of course, they never really had a big wide receiver last season. I mean, they had a couple receivers that put up anywhere between 200 and 400 yards, which their top receiver, speaking of which, Osiris Mitchell from last season, had 430 yards and 6 touchdowns last season, which that yardage is very, very low for any receiving position. And so for them to return Osiris Mitchell, I think that's good, but I mean, you're also losing your second and third wide receivers and Thomas and Guidry, which I mean, both of those receivers did not have all that big of seasons. Of course, Thomas had just over 400 yards with 2 touchdowns, and Guidry had much lower. So, yeah, as far as the receiving position goes, that is a little bit concerning for me as well. They also lose their top tight end in Farrell Green. And as far as the offensive line goes, they lose 2 there. They also lose 3 defensive linemen and 1 linebacker, as well as losing 3 in the secondary. So this defense does take a couple of big hits as well. And so, I mean, for Mississippi State, they've got a good quarterback in there in KJ Costello, but other than that, this team is losing a ton from 2019, and that does concern me in the end. So, if honestly, if KJ Costello had more to work around, I think that this team could definitely make it way past, a bowl season. I think this team could get up to 7, maybe even 8 wins, but when you're losing as much talent as this team already is, it does kind of concern me a little bit. It also will be the first season for new head coach Mike Leach. Of course, he's coming out of Washington State, and he moved to Mississippi State. So, yeah, this is going to be a very different environment for him in general. But that also brings up the question, is Mississippi State a dark horse for 2020? And honestly, I don't really think that they are. I don't think that this team really can make it really anywhere past 6-7 wins next season. I think it's possible, but I wouldn't say it's very likely. As far as your schedule goes, you start off the season against New Mexico on September 5th, followed by a road trip to NC State. And then you got Arkansas and Tulane also at home to finish off September. In your October, you got a really tough one. I mean, all 4 of your October games are really tough. You got Texas A&M at home, followed by Alabama and LSU. You've got 2 really tough road trips then after your bye week on October 10th. You also have Auburn to finish off October at home, and you also have Missouri to start off your November, followed by Kentucky, Alabama A&M, and then Ole Miss to finish it off. So, I mean, all around, your schedule is not that difficult in September and November, but that October is just brutal for this team. So, yeah, as long as you can survive October, I think this team could make it to a bowl game. But, yeah, as far as your September goes, I actually think you start out 4-0. I think that Mississippi State definitely could make it to a bowl game if they can get all 4 wins, especially in your September months, which I do expect them to. Of course, the NC State game could be a tough one with it being on the road, but NC State was not all that good last season, so I think this team definitely has a chance there. As far as your October goes, I think you lose all 4 of them. I mean, once again, that is just a brutal month. Having to play Texas A&M at home, which I expect them to get up to 9 wins. Then you got Alabama and LSU, 2 of the best teams in the conference, both on the road in consecutive weeks. And then you got Auburn, of course, right after that, also at home. So it's really tough for me to say whether or not this team could win any of those games in general. But yeah, I do expect them to lose all 4 of them. However, your November does look a little bit better. I think you win 2 of your last 4. I think you beat Missouri because that's at home for the most part. And then I do think you take a loss at Kentucky, followed by a win against Alabama A&M, and then you lose your last game of the season at Ole Miss. So in the end, still a decent season for Mississippi State. I think you'll make it to a bowl game. I think it's going to look pretty similar to how the 2019 season went. But once again, that October, I just really think throws things off for Mississippi State. I mean, you're going to have a decent amount of momentum going into that October. Of course, you win your first 4 games, but in the end, I just think Mississippi State, with as many losses as they're having, I just don't think it's possible that they get really much past 6 wins. So with that about wraps up our preview on Mississippi State. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below on this team. Let me know whether you think anything different here. But yeah, once again, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to slap a like on it, subscribe as well. It really helps out the channel, and I'd really appreciate that a ton. But yeah, once again, thanks for watching. Stay tuned for more from All Sports Central. I will see you all later.